Welcome to Cinema Bros with Spen and Nick, where we review all the great movies, past, current, future, so you don't have to.
And bad movies.
And bad movies. We don't
We haven't
discriminate
done
against
a bad movie. We haven't done a bad movie yet.
what would
That's not true. You did not like the bat mitzvah.
bat
You are
mitzvah.
so not coming to my bat mitzvah, the Adam Sandler and the Sandler Girls movie.
So real fast, the movies that we have already reviewed up to this point, if you want to check out our page on YouTube, we have reviewed Grind, The Hunt for the Wilder People, You Are So Not Invited to My Bar Mitzvah,
Bat mitzvah.
What Bat Mitzvah, and what was the first movie? Because I just have this as Cinema Bros 1.
What was the first? I thought the first movie wasn't Grind.
I think you had picked the first movie. I can't. Let's see. Ryan Gosling. Oh, it was Barbie.
Oh, it was just after Barbie had come out in theaters.
It was
Yes,
Barbie.
correct.
I need to change the title on that. Okay, so this week we are reviewing a classic. I'll call it a classic. It's been around for 12 years. Came out in 2011. Directed by Glenn Ficarra. And there's one other director. I always get confused when there are two directors with the same movie. Glenn Ficarra and John Requa. And the movie we are reviewing is Crazy Stupid Love.
Written
Steve
by
Carell.
Dan Fogelman, who also created This Is Us.
Yes, written by Dan Fogelman. Starring Steve Carell, Ryan Gosling, Julianne Moore, Emma Stone, Leo Tipton, Jonah Bobo, a young Joey King, Marissa Tomei, and
All-star cast.
Kevin Bacon as David Lindhagen. Josh Groban's in this movie. That's pretty much it in terms of notable actors and performances and actresses. Let's get into it, Nick. This is a movie that you and I have both seen before this review. We rewatched it recently.
I saw it in theaters.
The word I use to describe this movie, it is as fun of a rom-com as it gets.
I think that's fair. I saw this movie in theaters in 2011 at the Garden State Plaza, the mall in Bergen County, New Jersey, and it was me and 5 women from high school all seeing this movie together. It's a pretty cool move on my part.
I don't know. I mean, did they know you were straight at the time?
They did, and they loved it.
Okay, and were any of them interested in you sexually or romantically after that?
Give or take. Anyway,
okay.
I love Crazy Stupid Love. What I like about Crazy Stupid Love is it makes rom-coms a little more enjoyable for a male demographic that may not necessarily like rom-coms. Now, I like rom-coms in general. I'm a sucker for Love Actually and Definitely Maybe and The Ugly Truth, Gerard Butler, Katherine Heigl throwback. I like stupid, cheesy rom-coms, but I do think I'm in the minority as in the male category. So I love this because it kind of blends genres where it's a little raunchy and a little effed up and a little weird and funny and awkward and kind of turns that into a feel-good, well-intentioned rom-com.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Real quick, the synopsis for this movie. A middle-aged husband's life changes dramatically when his wife asks him for a divorce. He seeks to rediscover his manhood with the help of a newfound friend, Jacob, learning to pick up girls at bars. So Steve Carell is the middle-aged husband. Julianne Moore is his wife. Very beginning of the movie, they go out to dinner. They're on their way home. She tells him that she wants a divorce and that she slept with someone that she knows from work.
David Lindhagen.
That's the inciting incident. This sparks everything. Steve Carell starts going to a bar. He's lonely. He meets this gentleman, Jacob, played by Ryan Gosling. Jacob is this smooth, suave, good-looking ladies' man who can pick up women at the snap of a finger. He basically teaches Steve Carell how to become a man again, find his manhood, and sort of gets him over that grief stage of his initial split with his wife.
What I'll say before we get deeper than that is you talk about it opens up literally on a dinner table of Steve Carell and Julianne Moore. And he's like, on 3, let's say what we want for dinner. 1, 2, 3. And she says, divorce. I want to get a divorce. As someone, obviously, who considers themselves a screenwriter in the film industry, there is no better start to a movie than to literally just jump right into the action. And what this movie does so incredibly well is from the first scene, you are in it, there's drama, you are intrigued, you want to follow along, then it jumps right to Steve Carell jumping out of a car, and all of a sudden he's moving out and trying to get on with his life. So we get to the fun part with Ryan Gosling within the first like 15 minutes of the movie. And that's what I think this does so well. There's no build and setup, establishing the family and their relationship. They do that over time. You learn everything you need to learn about their past as we go forward into the future. So just a really good tool Fogelman did in the screenplay was start the script in the middle of the story and not in the beginning of the story.
Yeah, I as a viewer of movies and not necessarily a screenwriter like yourself, I couldn't agree more. And I want to go back to what you said initially in terms of comparing this to other rom-coms. This isn't there are cheesy aspects of this movie, but it's not so cheesy that as a guy, I'm watching this and I'm going, ugh, yuck, the entire movie. Yes, there are lovey-dovey moments, but that's not really the purpose of this movie, right? The purpose of this movie is more or less navigating relationships and understanding, what your partner wants and what you want. And there's really three main stories. Well, two stories with sort of a side story in this film, right? You have Steve Carell and his relationship with his soon to be ex-wife and him navigating that. You have Steve Carell and his relationship with Ryan Gosling and that, budding, blooming friendship and he becomes this different person, but Ryan Gosling is integral to Steve Carell's transformation. And then that sort of half a story you have is with Steve Carell's children and mainly his son, who is a hopeless romantic. He's in love with the babysitter.
His son is hilarious, and I've never seen him in anything else again.
So the very beginning of the movie, outside of that Steve Carell, Julianne Moore dinner scene that Nikki was talking about, you have his son being babysat. And I believe the woman's name is Leah Tipton. She ended up, she actually is in a, yes. Leo Tipton. She's in a ton of stuff. Just off the top of my head, she was in a movie with Miles Teller. Of course, now I can't get to her. Here we go. Leo Tipton. She was in Two Night Stand. That was the movie. Warm Bodies, Crazy Stupid Love. Okay. So she is Steve Carell's son's babysitter. One of the first scenes of the movie, she walks in on him masturbating. And like you talk about setting yourself up, it's within the first 5 minutes of the movie. She walks in. The kid's name is Robbie. She doesn't knock. Oh, Robbie. She freaks out. He goes, oh, get out, whatever. And then you find out that Robbie is in love with the babysitter. He immediately goes up to her afterwards. Her name's Jessica. And he tells her that he was thinking of her. He thinks of her all the time when he does it. And he's in love with her. So you have these two stories with Steve Carell. Then you have one story with his son. Then you have sort of another half story. So I guess three in total, because you have this character, Emma Stone, who you're not really sure what her deal is. She's at the same bar as Ryan Gosling. He hits on her. She turns him down. She kind of has her own life, her own deal. We'll get to that later in the podcast. But I think, Nick, to kind of bow this all up, it's two stories plus two half stories, and they're all brilliantly wove into one movie.
I don't think you should try to count stories. I think you trying to count how many stories there are doesn't make sense and sounds pretty dumb.
So four, I guess. So
I would say you have, in most movies, you have an A plot, and a B plot, right? The A plot in this movie would be the main storyline, which is Steve Carell and Julianne Moore's marriage falling apart. The B plot would be Emma Stone and Jacob having their own kind of will they, won't they. So there's kind of two will they, won't theys. There's Steve Carell and Julianne Moore's relationship, and there's Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone's relationship. And obviously those will weave together at some point. The little things you're referring to, I would even call those half stories. I would call those, things that they support the story, they're fun, but they're just secondary plot lines that are just meant to kind of create the atmosphere. So the story with Robbie, his son, chasing after Leo Tipton, the story with Kevin Bacon, David Lindhagen, still kind of chasing after Julianne Moore. those things are more so just filler, necessary filler, but I wouldn't really call those their own separate stories. So I get what you're going for, but that was just a fucking stupid mouthful to try to say there were 3.5 stories going on in a movie at the same time.
Yeah, and I respect you enough where most people who would tell me what I'm saying is dumb and a stupid mouthful, I'd want to punch in the face. But since I respect you, you're a screenwriter, I'm not going to have that reaction. I'm going to agree with you that you're right. It is filler. Having said that, it's just such a brilliantly done movie. The storytelling is great. How good is Kevin Bacon as David Lindhagen? I want to get out in front of this.
The casting is perfect. The casting
He
is
might be
perfect.
the MVP of the movie, Kevin Bacon.
He is so funny. My favorite line, and we're gonna give spoilers here, is just to give, obviously you guys know what happens if you've seen it. If not, turn it off right now. But basically what you end up finding out is Ryan Gosling helps Steve Carell pick up all these women. Steve Carell appreciates it, but he thinks Ryan Gosling's like this crazy womanizer. Then Ryan Gosling falls in love with Emma Stone. He finally wants to settle down. And the big plot twist is it turns out Emma Stone is Steve Carell's daughter. That, when they were 17, he knocked up Julianne Moore. It's why they got married young. And then she brings Ryan Gosling to the family meeting. And Steve Carell's like, wait, what the fuck? And they're like shocked, staring at each other. And Steve Carell doesn't approve of Ryan Gosling because he's seen how much of a womanizer he is. And Gosling's terrified. Carell tells them to break up and they won't. And it creates a huge rift in the family until we kind of get to this climax. The reason I just wanted to do that very quickly was because in that final scene, you have kind of everything coming together. Steve Carell wanting to punch Ryan Gosling. You then have this other little filler story of Leo Tipton, the babysitter, who the middle schooler Robbie likes, in love with Steve Carell, who wants to show him her nudes. And her dad, who's family friends with Steve Carell, finds the nudes. He goes to kill Steve Carell. Meanwhile, Kevin Bacon shows up at this party because Julianne Moore forgot her scarf in his car, and it ends up being Steve Carell, Ryan Gosling says, "You hurt my friend," tries to punches Kevin Bacon in the face. Steve Carell tackles Ryan Gosling and says, "Stay away from my daughter." Leo Tipton's dad tackles Steve Carell and says, "Stay away from my daughter." And my favorite line is Kevin Bacon going, "I don't even know you." And it's like the most like, "You hurt my friend. Stay away from my daughter. Stay away from my daughter. I don't even know you guys." And I just find that so comical.
Yeah. No, go on. Let me just respond to what you said, by the way, because a lot of the movies that people love, like the Love Actuallys, right? Valentine's Day, those stupid rom-coms where there are 19 different stories happening.
Stupid.
If you see the movie Valentine's Day?
That you cannot compare Valentine's Day or New Year's Eve to Love Actually.
I know, but
you just insulted every rom-com lover in the world. You said Love Actually is grouped into this. No, it's not a multiple storyline occurring film.
Okay, but my point is that scene you just discussed, in most movies where there are multiple stories happening, right? The stories don't coincide a lot of the times, specifically with rom-coms like Love Actually, like Valentine's Day, like New Year's Eve, which is another one. I think that the fact that they combined everything, right? The babysitter having a crush on Steve Carell being upset with Ryan Gosling for dating his daughter, David Lindhagen just showing up. And then, of course, Bernie, Bernie is the babysitter's father, played by John Carroll Lynch. He's been in a ton of movies. If you look him up, John Carroll Lynch, him getting upset because he thinks that Steve Carell is having this inappropriate relationship with his daughter. Like you said, the fact that they weave all that together and they did it in such a unique, such a funny, comical way where these are people with real angry emotions, right? Like, how could you sleep with, or how could you be in love with my daughter? She's 17. You're a womanizer. You can't date my daughter. How you cheat? How could you sleep with this guy's wife? But it's done in such a funny way that, like, I watched the movie with Victoria and she was okay with the movie up until that scene. And then once that scene happened, she's like, "Oh, this movie's kind of good."
Victoria is Spencer's wife, by the way.
Yes. Yeah. Well, if I say I'm watching with someone named Victoria, you assume she's my sister, my friend, or my wife. So pick.
So why don't we just call it what it is? For those listening, also, John Carroll Lynch, if you're struggling to remember who he is, he was Norm in Fargo. That was probably his biggest claim to fame, 1996 movie Fargo. I agree. I agree with Victoria. It gets really juicy. It gets really fun. It's an interesting movie because we talk about how it jumps right into the action, but then it really kind of just rides the story without any crazy twists and turns until the huge climax. In a lot of movies, you'll see there's kind of an act break. Act one doesn't really break. There's kind of just a blurred act one and act two in this film that just ends with everything kind of coming together and falling apart. Everyone kind of getting to the same place in that big blowout we just talked about. But most of the movie, and it's entertaining, is build up to that moment, and that's done through Steve Carell being a pussy, and then Gosling teaches him how to pick up women, and now he's sleeping with Marissa Tomei, who's this crazy sex woman who ends up also being his kid's teacher, and it's Julianne Moore going on dates with Kevin Bacon and kind of realizing she doesn't really like him, but she's trying to make it work, and it's Robbie, his son, doing these huge gestures with like the scarlet letter for his babysitter Leo Tipton, trying to get her, and there's kind of all these little funny storylines that are, I'm not going to say there's 3.5 stories, but there's all these little funny stories that are taking place and building up to that big blowout moment. And then the rest of the movie is kind of the resolution. Here's what I'll say about this, because we just talked about the big plot twist in this movie, and the big plot twist and the big reveal. And I remember seeing it in 2011, Emma Stone being Steve Carell's daughter, who's now dating Ryan Gosling, Steve Carell's womanizing mentor, was like the most genius thing I had ever seen. I was like, wow, that is shocking. That is cool. That is unique. That is original. That just made this story so much fun because you love the character. Steve Carell is the most kind-hearted, gentle, but stern kind of loving father. And you have Ryan Gosling, who also, they both seem like great people, but he's such like a little sneaky womanizer, will say anything to get in a girl's pants. And then you realize they're just going to have so much beef in that moment when Gosling's dating Emma Stone. The plot twist to me, and I maybe watching it as a 28-year-old instead of as a 17-year-old, was like, how in conversation did Emma Stone never tell Ryan Gosling her dad's name, that her parents just got divorced, that her mom cheated on her dad with a guy at work? It just feels like they were dating over like a month, kind of sped up, and he was going to meet her mom, but not the dad. Steve Carell just happened to be there, and he had no context on, like, again, it's movie magic. I forgive it because and you'll only hear me say that how much of a fantastic movie this is when I give it my rating. I love this movie. It's one of my favorite rom-coms of all time. I enjoy it every time. It literally kills me. It's entertaining the entire time. That to me was the first time I was like, that's a little far-fetched. Well, that not in one point in time did Emma Stone mention anything about her father to tip Gosling off. Again, I forgive it, but just something I had not thought about 10 years ago that I thought about last week.
So the one thing I want to say about that, right, is the unique thing for me is the relationship between Carell and Gosling up to that moment. Steve Carell sort of worships Ryan Gosling, right? He sees this guy in beautiful, nice suits, picking up gorgeous women, and he basically, Steve Carell, his transformation into becoming this guy who picks up women, he's trying to be like Ryan Gosling. And Ryan Gosling has this sort of power over him, right? He's like, hey, I have this secret stuff that'll make you the fucking man. And in that moment where Steve Carell finds out that Ryan Gosling is dating his daughter, all the power that Ryan Gosling had is gone. And all of a sudden that relationship where it was Steve Carell was admiring Ryan Gosling, then you sort of realize, oh no, Ryan Gosling is now sort of powerless to his girl's father. And then there's that scene in the bar where, you know, after that whole blow up, Steve Carell doesn't want to talk to anyone. He doesn't want to talk to his ex-wife, doesn't want to talk to his daughter, doesn't want to talk to Ryan Gosling. He's upset. And Ryan Gosling sees him at the bar. And you know, this is like the rom-com cheesy line, but you love it because it built up to the whole movie. Gosling goes, you know, I forget what the exact line is, but I'm paraphrasing here. He's like, I was trying to teach you to be more like me. In actuality, I wanted to be more like you. And I get choked up saying it because it's such a, every moment up until that scene is just so powerful, right? Because it's Steve Carell figuring out who he is as a man, and he still wants to get back with his ex-wife. Gosling is his character. By the way, we'll get into this in a little bit. I think it's a top 5 Ryan Gosling role of his career. I think he has the strongest performance out of anybody. He's so likable. He's such a douche to Steve Carell, but he's helpful at the same time. I just like to me, this was such a good Ryan Gosling role, and this is someone I've never seen La La Land, so I can't comment there.
Overrated.
I loved the fact that their relationship, the dynamic, just immediately changes once you find out Gosling is dating his daughter, and then the rest of the movie is really Gosling, and it's not that much longer. It's about 10 minutes longer after that, but Gosling is trying to get Steve Carell's approval, right? And that, to me, that was such a cool change up. And I get I understand the whole, why didn't that come up? But for that scene, in that moment, for the viewer to realize, like, oh shoot, like what I thought was something the entire movie is now something completely different. That's hard to do. It's hard to make the viewer feel kind of dumb, but in that moment, you're like, oh shit, that's who Nana is, right? They refer to her as Nana because her name's Hannah. She couldn't pronounce it. You think they're talking about a grandma early in the movie, Steve Carell's ex-wife, and they're talking about Emma Stone's character.
Yeah, I agree. That complete reverse and switch into roles of who's the teacher, who's the mentor, who's the teacher, who's the student, like immediately flips. Who wants
Right.
whose respect? Who's trying to earn whose respect? Really well done. There's a line, because you talked about getting choked up. There's a line where, Steve Carell and Ryan Gosling hang at the same bar during the entire movie where they pick up women, and then Gosling starts dating Emma Stone, and Steve Carell finds out, and he just ends up going to the bar by himself and getting drunk. And Gosling shows up, and he says,
That's what I was talking about. Are you referring to the same scene I was talking about? I was referring to the same scene.
The same scene.
5 minutes ago. Yeah.
I'm talking about a different line. Because you went to the line where he's like, it turns out I want to be more like you. What I like is Steve Carell kind of responds. He's like, I'm happy for you. I really am. It seems like you've changed, but I've seen too much. And Hannah, my daughter, is too good for you. And one of my favorite lines, he says, my daughter's too good for you. And Gosling kind of takes a moment, and then he goes, you're a good dad, Cal. And he walks away. And he's kind of like, I said everything I could say, but I can't fault the man for seeing me before and realizing that I was such a womanizer, that I was such a playboy, that I would have done anything to get in a girl's pants, that he's really just protecting his daughter. And Gosling almost understands why he wouldn't give him his approval. So yeah, same scene. I like it towards the end. Those lines are my favorite. I forgive. I know you just mentioned like that whole plot thing. They referenced Nana earlier on. I like I said, I forgive it. There was one other thing now that I'm going to forget that I found hard to believe watching it again, and I'm trying to think. Maybe I can come back to it. But there's one other thing, and there was like another plot hole. Not a plot hole, where I was just like, okay, another thing that like you forgive back in the day. But keep going, and I'm going to see if I can circle back on.
Yeah. How about the fact that Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling and Steve Carell are all at the same bar?
No, I can forgive them hanging at the bar. Now I remember what it is. So Emma Stone is dating Josh Groban.
Yes. By the way, underrated performance by Josh Groban to be that annoying, douchey boyfriend who she eventually breaks up with. He was good.
He's a lawyer, and he's super nerdy and weird, but seems nice. And Emma Stone thinks he's going to propose to her, and she's super excited. And then he just ends up asking her to join his law firm, and she realizes she wants to be with someone who takes her more seriously. Here was my plot hole that I just remembered. Not really a plot hole, but so she's dating Josh Groban to the point where they had to be dating for at least 1.5, 2 years because she wants him to propose. Then Emma Stone has this friend in the movie. I don't know the actress. I've never seen her again, but she was hilarious. She basically is encouraging Emma Stone to bang Ryan Gosling and ditch Josh Groban because she's like, he's so boring, he's a loser, bang the hot guy at the bar. Two things. One, if she's been dating Josh Groban for like 2 years, why is her friend trying to get her to cheat on Josh Groban and talking such blatant shit about how much of a pussy Josh Groban is? Then Josh Groban doesn't propose, so she dumps him on the spot and goes to bang Ryan Gosling. Again, I forgive this in a movie. It was part of the progression of the story. It kind of set everything in motion with her and Gosling's relationship. But isn't it kind of a dick move for one, a friend to be so blatantly against your boyfriend, and two, to dump your boyfriend who was Groban was very nice. He was just a little geeky, and in the same night go bang somebody else and immediately fall in love.
Okay, so a few things here, right? Number one, yes, it's normal for a friend to look out for your interests. And if they don't think that your partner is a good match for you, if they're a good friend, they're going to voice that. So yeah, I think it's a little bit
Well, he
peculiar when
wasn't
you're
even
like,
a dick. He wasn't even a dick. He was just nerdy. He was just like, he's a loser. But I was like, he's actually a nice dude.
I guess, but that's just like, no, that's a friend being a good friend. And then the other part of it, I think a huge part of Emma Stone's character is that she plays it safe, right? Being with Josh Groban, that's it. That's a safe move. This guy, he calls her Hannah Banana. He's super PG. And I think part of the reason why she runs to Ryan Gosling right afterwards, it's one of those, I'm not a risk taker until I take a huge risk. And in that scene where he doesn't propose, he offers her the law firm job. She freaks out. She's like, you know what? I'm freaking out of it. She has the scene where she chugs alcohol. It was a table of like 7 or 8 people. It's not. And that's the other thing. They're never at like a dinner where it's just the 2 of them. They're always like at some weird group thing, right, with his coworkers and whatever. So she has this moment of clarity, let's call it that, where he offers her the job. She sort of freaks out. She takes a big alcohol gin drink. She starts chugging it. She's like, is this gin? I hate it. And then as she's leaving, she high fives her best friend who was against the relationship with Groban the whole time. And clearly the best friend saw something there, right? So then she runs to Ryan Gosling. He hit on her a few weeks ago at this bar. She points at him. She goes, "You." She's covered in rain. It was raining. She walks up to him and aggressively kisses him. And that for me is a transformation for her of being this safe person in a safe relationship to a risk taker. And you said she goes and bangs Ryan Gosling. She does not bang Ryan Gosling. That is probably the most romantic scene in the movie.
She bangs him with her emotions, and that's worse.
They go back to his house. By the way, plot hole. What does Ryan Gosling do for work?
I know.
He has the most amazing, incredible feng shui Hollywood, California house I've ever fucking seen.
He mentions, in passing, in bed, he mentions that one of his parents passed away, and that's how he got all this. He says,
Okay.
my dad died when I was young, and that's how I got all this. So
Got
they
it.
brush on it, yes. But it is true. He goes to bars every night. He has the nicest possible house, car, material things, and he never once goes to work in the entire movie.
But no, that scene where him and Emma Stone like kind of go on their first date. It's at his house, and there's that line. She goes, "So what happens next?" Right? Because he's a playboy. He sleeps with a lot of women, and he goes, "Well, I don't want to say." She's like, "What's your big move?" He goes, "I turn on Dirty Dancing and I do the Patrick Swayze move." She's like, "Get out of here. That doesn't work."
He says, "I work Dirty Dancing into the conversation."
And into the conversation, right? And then they eventually do the move where she runs into his arms and you hear, "And I've had the time of my life." And after that, you think maybe they're gonna bang, and it's just that dialogue to me that's the most rom-com, because they go into the bed. She goes, "I know what happens." The PG version is I fall asleep and you kiss me on the head and we don't end up having sex. But you know what? We're going to bang hard, blah, 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 blah. They end up talking the whole night. He falls asleep and she kisses him on the head and tucks him in. That was the most romantic scene of the movie.
It was a great scene. Again, I feel bad for Josh Groban, but it was a good scene. I want to slightly divert for a second, because what I think this movie, and you're talking about all the feel-good moments, and we just kind of spoke about all like the tearing moments and the love moments. What this movie does so well is it balances really ridiculous comedic moments with those heartfelt moments. And there's lines in the movie that are unforgettable to this day. One that Ryan Gosling says, "Be better than the Gap." Right? He's trying to make Steve Carell. He's trying to up his fashion, up his game, up his confidence. Steve Carell's like, "Why don't we just go to the Gap and get new clothes?" He's like, and he walks out. He walks out. Carell has to chase after him, and he slaps him in the face. He says, "Be better than the Gap, Cal." And it's such this funny, silly concept. I turned to my girlfriend Andy. I go, "I wonder how Gap feels about that," because it's really insulting to the Gap. Another really fun comedic scene to me is when Leo Tipton's character, the babysitter in high school, goes up to the popular girl in school and it's like, how do you get older
Uh,
guys? And the girl's
yeah.
like, well, you don't have boobs. I have boobs. She's like, and Leo Tipton had like these funny, she makes the funniest expressions, Leo Tipton. I give her credit. She looks down, she looks up, she's like, yeah, no. And then she goes like, how old's the guy we're talking about? And Leo Tipton's so awkward. She's like, no, he's like 50. She's like, oh, you're dirty. And Leo Tipton, who's so awkward and want, it's like, oh yeah, I'm dirty. And like she's just making the and it's just those little moments
Yeah.
to me that just add up. The Marissa Tomei cameo.
Look, can we
Where
talk about that scene, by the way, where they're in the
she goes
classroom
back
and
to
they're
Marissa. Yes, yes.
that was amazing, right? So Steve Carell and Julianne Moore, they haven't really seen each other since they split. There's been rumblings, you know, Julianne Moore sort of heard it through the grapevine that Steve Carell has been seeing women, but she doesn't really know. And they meet Robbie's teacher, and Robbie had this outburst in class because he was rejected by the babysitter at the same time that his parents were going through this split. So he has this outburst. He says the word asshole a bunch in front of the class, and Steve Carell and Julianne Moore have to go in to talk to the teacher. So Steve Carell does not realize that the teacher is the first woman he picked up when he was at the bar with Ryan Gosling, played by Marissa Tomei. So there's just this uncomfortable. I mean, it's uncomfortable, but it's so funny. They're sitting there. Julianne Moore and Steve Carell are sitting in this empty classroom, and Marissa Tomei's sitting at the teacher's desk, and she starts getting into how Robbie misbehaved, and it ends up her being mad at Steve Carell for not calling her back after they hooked up. And she has the one line about, you know, going down on someone for 6 hours because they're nervous. And then that basically gives away that she slept with Steve Carell, and Julianne Moore freaks out. That was such a great scene. Marissa Tomei was so perfectly casted for that role. And the best line is you know, she says something, everyone's silent, and Steve Carell turns to Julianne Moore. He goes, well, she's an alcoholic. Like, as if that was going to excuse his behavior, that he slept with her because she's an alcoholic, so she's hysterical. Just such a fun. That to me was the funniest scene of the movie.
I'm trying to think. There were a few other moments that I just laugh out loud.
What about at the end with the awkward encounters with everyone, and he goes to his daughter, who's played by Joey King. Joey King's a legitimate actress now. She was in Bullet Train,
but she barely had any lines in that.
But the one line he goes, you know, why don't you go watch TV? She goes, I'm going to go watch TV. And Ryan Gosling goes, can I come with you? And she goes, no. And she walks away.
It's like a little thing like that. There is so many little tidbits, and I think, listen, you know me, I have a little bit of a raunchier sense of humor, and they almost make raunchy jokes feel more lighthearted in their delivery and what they're doing. When they're talking about masturbation, when they're making boob jokes, when they're talking about sex, they really almost downplay these more inappropriate topics, and they all play it so sincerely. And I always reference comedians like Bo Burnham, who I know I love. Burnham makes the most effed up jokes, says the most effed up things, but when it feels like it's coming from a sincere place that he's genuinely a good guy, you forgive that. And I find that, like, this story is about forgiveness. Obviously, it's about Julianne Moore cheating on Steve Carell, and the audience and Steve Carell still believing she's a good person that loves him. And I find that with the humor, it does that too, where some jokes like cross the line a little bit about banging and sex and cheating and bodies and penises, and you kind of forgive it because you know the intentions are pure. So when I keep talking about this like blending of comedy and sincerity and raunchy humor, again, I can't stress enough that there aren't a lot of shows and movies. And I'll say New Girl is a really good example of that. Like a wholesome show that also makes effed up jokes that you forgive. But this movie just does that so well. And I think Ryan Gosling's character is probably the best at it. Oh, I remember the scene I was thinking of too, when Steve Carell's in his office and his boss comes in and he goes, he can kind of tell something's off with Steve Carell. So he's being overly nice and he goes, hey, you had such a great quarter. Your sales are amazing. Like, kind of letting Steve Carell know he knows something's up. And Steve Carell goes, oh, you heard me and Julianne Moore I forget her name, are getting divorced. And he goes, oh, divorce? We all thought you had cancer. Thank God. And Steve Carell goes, nope, not cancer, just divorce. like, lucky me. And the guy's like, that's incredible. And as Steve Carell's walking out of the office, the boss goes, hey, everyone, it's not cancer. He's just getting divorced. And they all start clapping at Steve Carell's divorce as he's walking out of the office and he's doing like a fake, like happy. And it was just so brilliant, that moment. And it was such a dark joke done in such a silly, heartfelt, tasteful way. And I can't give, again, Dan Fogelman, you rarely give a screenwriter credit because a lot of the time it's the actors making lines better, it's the directors making scenes better, which they do, but you can't make up for good writing a lot of the time. And I thought what Fogelman did with that dark humor was done really well.
The movie's also rated PG-13. So, I mean, when you were what, like 14, 15 years old, like, you know, this was also a movie for kids. Well, not kids, but teens and preteens. So I said this was one of Gosling's best movies. Where do you rank this for Gosling?
It's tough. I think I've seen more Gosling movies than you have. There's a movie called Blue Valentine.
Never saw
and
that.
it's Ryan Gosling, and I want to say Carey Mulligan, but I get confused with her and Michelle Williams.
Michelle Williams.
That's who I get confused with. That is a really hard movie to watch. I watched it once and I enjoyed it. I never want to watch it again. It's basically like the slow deterioration of a marriage, and it gets really rocky and abusive and fucked up. But Gosling plays like this really troubled alcoholic husband. And I think it was one of the best performances I've ever seen from anybody beside, not even just one of Gosling's best roles. So I'd say Blue Valentine's up there for me. Barbie is up there for me. I thought Gosling was unbelievable in Barbie. Throw some other Gosling movies out. Now I'm trying to think.
There's a movie that I never saw about Pine. What is it? Well, La La Land. I never saw La La Land.
La La Land, I would put up there. The Big Short, I think he's fantastic in.
Yes, The Big Short. You ever see The Nice Guys with him and Russell Crowe?
Yes, he's great in The Nice Guys. I agree with that. Top five, I would maybe put it, I'm just looking at a list of his movies, maybe about 4 or 5. I don't think I can put it ahead of Barbie. I don't think I can get it ahead of Blue Valentine. I don't think I can put it ahead of above The Big Short, but maybe it's fourth. Maybe I'd put it before La La Land.
I never saw. So there's a movie called The Place Beyond the Pines.
I haven't seen that either.
He was in that. That's a serious movie. He was the love interest in The Notebook. That's kind of where he got his start.
Yeah, I think we all enjoyed that, but I don't think it was the most.
I didn't enjoy that movie. Yeah, I mean, look, we're missing a few. Fracture, The Ides of March. He was in Gangster Squad, which was a complete terrible movie. For me, the movies I've seen, Barbie, this movie, and then The Nice Guys. He's great, and you're telling me he's also great in The Blue Valentine. I believe you on that. If I can add,
he's in The Ides of March.
The Ides of March. And you know what? We're missing. He was in Remember the Titans.
I know he's in Remember the Titans. It was a great role, but it was a very small role.
Yeah. If I can add 3 scenes to this movie,
the scenes. Pop trivia. Who takes his role on defense in Remember the Titans?
It's your boy from Scrubs, right?
Donald Faison.
Faison, yeah. Three alternative scenes or things I would add to this movie. Number 1, I would have Josh Groban standing outside of Ryan Gosling's house as he's doing the Dirty Dancing move with Emma Stone, just crying, being like, and a banana.
No, only if he's singing, you raise me up
yes.
so I can stand on mountains.
I would want that. I also want a moment. So at the very end of the movie, the babysitter, right, who Steve Carell's son has been crushing on, she was going to give these nudes to Steve Carell. The dad found out. Nikki explained that earlier. She ends up giving these nudie pictures to the son as sort of a like, haha, like, you know, I know you're in love with me. I'm a lot older than you, but here are these nudes of me. I would have liked the police to arrest her right after that for giving nudes to like a young boy. That would have been a good scene.
Andy's my girlfriend's out too. It's a felony.
It is a felony. And then the only other scene I would have added to this is at the very end of the movie. I just would have liked David Lindhagen to die somehow.
That's the thing, though. They make Kevin Bacon and Josh Groban, who you would call kind of like the bad guys in the movie. They make them still pretty likable. Like Kevin Bacon plays such a good, innocent dude who's like, listen, I know I shouldn't have slept with a married woman, but she wanted to do it and I really like her and I'm going to pursue it. And he kind of just takes all the shit everyone gives him. Like he kind of just sits there. There's a scene where he tries to be friends with Robbie, Steve Carell's kid, and he just stares at him and he doesn't say anything incriminating Kevin Bacon. He's just kind of like, okay, fair, and like walks out. But no, I don't think he deserved to die. I do think he was still silly and likable for being kind of the enemy and the antagonist of the film, if you will.
You know what it is? Our mother, she's a huge Kevin Bacon fan. She is. And I don't know. I guess in a weird sense, when Julianne Moore cheats on Steve Carell with Kevin Bacon, Julianne Moore is a redhead. My mother is a redhead. I just think I took it personal. I didn't like that. It felt like my mom was cheating on my dad with David Lindhagen, Kevin Bacon. And I wish there was, like, you ever see Old School? Remember at the end of Old School in one of the deleted scenes, the guy who was a douchebag who cheated on the girl that Luke Wilson was in love with. He ends up getting in a car accident, falling off a highway, and his car crushes Jeremy Piven's character, and they both die. I wish something similar to that. Like, I don't know, David Lindhagen goes to the bar and he tries to pick up a girl and like just gets stabbed or something. I would have loved that.
I mean, hey, remember, we forgive Julianne Moore in this movie, and we don't have to dive into this. We talked about it a little bit. It's a controversial subject. I know people who, if someone cheated on their significant other, would never forgive them. This movie is about a woman cheating and finding forgiveness and rediscovering your marriage, and the kind of the message being, yes, Julianne Moore cheated. It was wrong to do so. But what was broken in their marriage for her to do that? And you kind of realize, even though she fucked up more, Steve Carell is somewhat at fault, and he needs to find kind of what puts them together.
So you don't sign off on a David Lindhagen death scene?
I don't sign off on the death scene. Why don't we get to the movie rating?
Yeah, movie rating. I give it an 8.8 out of 10.
Wow.
That's a legitimate score for me. I thoroughly enjoy this movie. Good acting all around, good storytelling. Like Nikki said, it's the perfect blend between comedy, romance, and it's one of the most fun movies I've ever watched that isn't a purely stupid comedy, because that is my type of movie, right? The old schools, the Anchormans, any movie that has zero sort of point to the story outside of just it's ridiculous and funny. This was a movie that obviously there's heart in it. But 8.8 out of 10. How about yourself?
I'm going to give it a 9.1. This to me is a near perfect film. Structurally, casting, jokes, tightness. There's really no dead space in the entire movie. Like, there's never a point where I get bored. There's never a point where I think you could have gotten away without that scene. Even if the climax comes later and there's so much buildup, it's just entertaining. You could watch Gosling and Steve Carell's banter all fucking night. It's so funny. The only things I nitpicked, like I said, were the tiny plot holes of how would Gosling not find out. But that in no way is enough for me to demote this movie to below a 9. I think it's a great movie. I think it's a movie for everyone. I think me, you, my mom, my dad, your mom, your dad, they're the same people. Anybody could watch this movie and find the joy and the humor and the wholesomeness in it. So it's kind of, to me, yeah, it's high praise. It's universally loved and appealing, and it's just extremely tight and well done.
Yeah, I think for me, if I can change one thing about this movie, I would want more of everything and less of the son and less of the babysitter. I did not love that part of it. To me, it wasn't as funny. It was uncomfortable. It was awkward. You know, the concept of this 13-year-old kid being in love with this 17-year-old kid, and like, I get it. It's a movie about love, and that's the whole premise. And she's in love with his dad, and he's in love with her. But there was too much of that for me. I would have rathered more Emma Stone and Gosling. I would have rathered more Steve Carell and Julianne Moore. Even show me a little bit more of Julianne Moore and David Lindhagen, right? Like, I just, the son and the babysitter, that was the only part of the movie where I just thought, this is uncomfortable. Like, I don't find this very funny.
I get what you're saying, but I have to disagree, because it was essential to the climax of Robbie the
His
resolution,
graduation
giving this
speech.
graduation speech, and Steve Carell comes in to say, my son's being an idiot right now because he stopped believing in love. So you kind of had to have that Robbie buildup and him getting his heart broken by the
Fair.
babysitter, Leo Tipton, in order for Steve to trigger Steve Carell's speech at the end. And just to give the 10-second, babysitter breaks the kid's heart. He's supposed to give his middle school graduation speech. He gives a really depressing speech about how love isn't real. Steve Carell comes and saves the day with a great speech and kind of wins Julianne Moore back. So I agree where it's not the most enjoyable, fun parts of the film. It is minimal and it is integral to building up to that point at the end of the film.
Yeah, I get it. You had the Scarlet Letter scene where he freaks out. You had his big grand gesture where he tries to show her he loves her in front of the entire school. Could have done without one of those scenes. That's all. That's all I'm saying.
Sure.
All right. Nick gave it a 9.1. I gave it an 8.8. What does that average out to? An 8.95?
Yeah, so I guess a 9.
Yes, a 9. All right. 9 out of 10. Crazy Stupid Love. That might be one of our highest collective reviews yet. I don't remember what the other movies got. But thanks for listening to another edition of Cinema Bros with Spen and Nick. I get to choose what we watch next week, right?
Yeah.
Ooh, this is going to be good. All right. I don't have it yet, but I'm going to think of it. I'll post it on Instagram. I'll tell Nick, and he will have to watch whatever I come up with. If you guys like the pod, subscribe to our YouTube page. Check out our other episodes where we review other movies that were mentioned earlier on the pod, and have a great rest of your day. Goodbye.